Sometimes you arrive at a breakthrough insight, almost by accident. This one today is potentially big. You ready? Richard Allen was not targeting Libby or Abby. He was targeting someone else. I've had hits and misses with my speculations, and some of you understandably don't approve of speculating. I do appreciate that. But I did land one big hit. Call it lucky if you want, probably so. But I predicted a month before the arrest of Allen that the killer would be a father of a daughter who'd recently left the house. I suggested maybe it was a girl going to college, and that her leaving the nest triggered the murders. I speculated that the killer saw himself as a good father, and that's why he never killed before. I believe the police had also concluded this, and that they hoped the image the killer had of himself as a good father might prevent him from killing again, an idea that must have terrorized police for 5 years. His daughter leaving presented him with the freedom to act on fantasies he'd long maintained, but it also triggered rage. He was losing his most valued possession. Well, it turns out Richard Allen does have one child, a daughter, who got engaged 2 months before the murders. So this speculation seems to be largely holding up. I may have gotten lucky, but I wasn't just pulling stuff out of a hat, and I'm not going to do that in this episode either. You just look at the evidence, make deductions, and from that, speculations. Give me a chance to make the case. Sorry about the shades. It's obviously a desperate and hopeless attempt to look cool, but mostly it's just because the light bothers my eye. Okay, let's get to this breakthrough insight. Richard Allen is seen on surveillance racing by the Harvest store at 1:27. He parks his car, but then sits in it for 10 minutes. Waiting. For what? He then exits the car and walks to the trail. We know the times because he walks by 3 young teenage girls at 1:40, and they become witnesses in the case. About 7 minutes later, he reaches the bridge. It's 11:47. A young woman, an adult, sees him there, then turns back. A minute or two later, Kelsey drops off Libby and Abby. They walk the trail and reach the bridge about 10 minutes after that. Remember that sequence and those times because the insight is right there staring at us in the face. But to get there, we have to first discuss communications and social media. When I began putting together notes for this episode, the focus I had in mind was very different. If you've watched my previous episodes, you know I've always leaned towards the idea that this was a lone killer. But there are compelling reasons to lean the other way, that there was an accomplice. Even the prosecutor at Allen's arraignment stated the police are still working hard on every angle and can't rule this out. And there are reasons to think someone else might be involved, in particular Keegan Kline. A friend of mine and of the channel, Dave Jenkins, a former federal law enforcement officer who has followed the case closely, holds this belief. Over the phone, we take opposing sides on this, which is really helpful. We sift through and eliminate possibilities until you get to the things that can't be eliminated. My original intent for this episode was to present that side of the argument, the possibility that Keegan Kline is somehow involved here. I was putting together notes to do just that when, bam, the insight slapped me in the face. Let's start with why I've long believed the killer acted alone, and also the possible problem with that belief. It's my view that the police have all of Libby's communications, and that they found no evidence of her arranging to meet anyone at the bridge, no evidence of her posting in social media that she was going to the bridge. I don't know that for sure. The cops have done a great job keeping a lid on things such as the bullet found at the scene. So they might have communications from Libby where she arranged to meet someone. But all indications from police interviews over the years are that they do not. The police are close to Kelsey, Libby's sister, and she seems to have always believed there was no arranged meeting or social media post. But here's to me what's really revealing. Last year, police interrogated Keegan Kline. The transcript leaked out. The police went over suspicious Googles Kline made in the weeks after the murders, such as looking for images of the Sandy Hook victims and information about how long DNA lasts. So they seem to have a lot of Kline's communications, though possibly and probably not all. He wiped his phone. But while police leaned hard, using their knowledge of his searches to pressure him, they never said anything like, We have communications from Libby's phone, and we know someone using the Anthony Schatz account arranged to meet Libby that day. Anthony Schatz was the persona Klein created to catfish underage girls. And if police had a message like that, they 100% absolutely would have used it to pressure Klein, because that would point a finger directly at him, which would force him to give up someone that he may have given the account to, if that was what happened. This tells us the police do not have communications from Libby's phone or social media accounts that show her arranging to meet Anthony Schatz. Is it possible they don't have all of her communications? I don't think it's likely. Even if messages were deleted, my understanding is that the texts could be retrieved on her phone, and deleted messages on apps can be retrieved by the app company, which they will do when presented with a subpoena by law enforcement. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's the best I could find researching it. But here's where an element of doubt comes in. There's an app that's now called Yabu, which at the time was called Yellow, no connection to this channel. It was designed as a companion to Snapchat. Klein used Snapchat to catfish Libby with the fictional Anthony Schatz. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there's a special place in hell for the people who designed this app. It's built intentionally like a dating app, with swipe features and messages that automatically delete after being read. But Snapchat was designed to target teens, and so was Yellow. Those designers knew predators would use it. They didn't care. They sold the app for several $1 billion, a fortune built on targeting kids. Anyway, the disappearing messages probably did not prove to be a problem for law enforcement. As I said, these can be retrieved with a subpoena, so police should have all of Libby's messages. However, there's a bigger worry. The app has a feature where you can track in real time the location of everyone in your Yabu or Yellow group. As I said, there's a special place in hell for these people who created this. And since maybe I'll end up there too for the crime of wearing these glasses on camera, I'll gladly stoke the furnace if the devil needs someone to. So if someone used a false identity to get into a group of underage teens on this app, they could track the location of each member. Did Libby use this app? Did any local predators? Did Richard Allen? She did use Snapchat, and that was how Klein catfished her. Police have not said if she used Yellow. If she used it, I presume police would know this from her phone and know who was in her group. So let me sum up my conclusions on whether Libby arranged to meet anyone or posted that she'd be at the bridge. I believe the answer is very likely no. Police likely have all of her messages and posts. The indications are no one knew she was going to the bridge, and in fact, Kelsey thought it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. However, if she was using Yellow, anyone in her group, including a catfisher, could track her. They'd know she left the house and could follow her travels real time. Now, I want to bring you back to the timeline. Richard Allen parked his car at 1:30. At that time, Libby was still at home. It was still 10 or 15 minutes before Kelsey would drive them to the trail. So if Allen was targeting Libby that day, it was not through tracking her, because when he drove to the trail, Libby was still at home. Of course, the timing is suspicious. Libby and Abby arrived at the bridge at 2 p.m., which is on the hour, and on the hour feels more like a meeting time. Richard Allen arrived at the bridge only 10 minutes before the girls, so it's not like he was hanging around all afternoon hunting for victims. And so we shouldn't be too hasty in ruling out a possible planned meeting between Libby and Richard Allen. It just seems that police have searched high and low for 5 years for any evidence of a planned meeting and found nothing. Again, you have to go back to basic principles. If Libby never arranged to meet someone there and never posted about it on social media, then Allen couldn't have known she'd be there. And his reason for going to the trail could not have been because he was tracking her, because she was still at home when he went. So if this is all true, then Libby and Abby were not targeted. But Allen's visit to the trail might not have been random. I think he was targeting someone else. I want to go back to something. Why did Allen wait 10 minutes in his car? Maybe he was on the phone, maybe he was listening to the radio, but I don't think so. This was a killer in hunt mode. He was focused, intense. Every thought and action in that moment was predatory. If he'd been targeting Libby and somehow knew she'd be at the bridge at 2 p.m., would he wait in his car like that? Maybe. I guess if he went to the bridge too early, the longer he hung around, the more there was a chance of a witness identifying him. However, that close to the expected meeting time, in his hunt mode, I don't see him waiting. He'd head out to the bridge and wait there. get a sense if there was any potential witnesses around. If Alan was meeting Libby at the bridge at 2 p.m., a 10-minute walk from his car, and he parked at 1:30, he'd go right to the bridge. He wouldn't wait there. He definitely wouldn't wait there 10 minutes. But he did wait there. And if he wasn't waiting for Libby, what was he waiting for? Libby wasn't the only kid using these apps. My guess is any kids her age whose parents allowed them to have a phone were using it. Probably a lot of kids in Delphi. At 1:27, Alan's car drives by the Harvest store. At that very moment, the 3 young teenage girls that he would soon encounter were at a bench on the trail, taking a photo and posting it to social media. So they had a phone. They were on their way back to the entrance of the trail. We know at 12:43, 45 minutes earlier, the girls were at the bridge. They took a photo and posted it. So the girls had arrived at the trail at least an hour earlier, walked to the bridge, hung around, snapped photos, then took their time walking back. Were any of them using the Yellow app? If so, their locations were being tracked in real time. Anyone in their Yellow group could track them. Was Richard Allen in that group? Let's assume so for speculative reasons. So he's at home, logs onto Yellow, and sees this girl he has targeted is now at the trail. He jumps in his car and drives and parks. He's watching the progress of his target on his phone. He knows exactly where she is. His plan is to abduct her when she reaches the end of the trail at the entrance. The reason for not taking her on the trail is because there was a good chance of encountering someone else, as he did later with Sue. But if he takes the girl at the end of the trail, he has more control over whether there are other witnesses. If there's someone else arriving, he can abort the whole thing. But if there's no one else, he takes the girl towards his car, which is parked in an unusual spot. So once he gets her away from that trail entrance, he's unlikely to be seen. And he has more control over it because at the trail, he has a wider view. So if someone else is just arriving, he's going to see it. He's much less likely to see that on the trail. Therefore, his plan is to get to the end of the trail at the same time as the girl. If no one else is around, he abducts her at gunpoint. Since it's unlikely his target is traveling alone, he probably expects to abduct 2 girls. However, when he arrives, he finds there are 3 girls. That's too much, so he aborts the whole plan. But that close call has made him feel more alive than ever before in his life. It's the first time he ever attempted to act on his murderous fantasies, and he felt a tremendous rush. His brain was flooding with dopamine, like a drug addict's first time shooting heroin. He proceeded to the bridge. Minutes later, the young adult, Sue, arrived. My guess is that she escaped with her life. Alan's fantasies may or may not have centered on underage teens, but with his brain firing on all cylinders, Richard Allen was primed to kill a young woman. Her instincts raising alarms, she turned around and left. Allen now started back up the trail, but after a few minutes, he passed Abby and Libby, who were heading towards the bridge. Allen turned around and followed. Thanks, everyone. I want to tell you about a new exploration of mine. You've probably heard by now of ChatGPT, the AI chat program. This thing is sweeping the world, and I've been tiring it out with questions, getting it to help me create stories and screenplays, and just having fun with it. As you know, we do some true crime here. People are interested in true crime for different reasons. For a lot of people, it's kind of a dark escape. It's cathartic. Or with some people, it connects them to other human beings by making them feel something. It's not that they enjoy the suffering of others, far from it. Most of the people I know who are into true crime are also some of the most empathetic people I know. So I think sharing people's pain is a way for them to feel connected to other human beings. And it's that connection that they really want. For me, it's different. I also feel the deep empathy for the victims, but the experience is, well, icky. It makes me feel awful, puts me in a foul mood. I have to retreat to old episodes of 2.5 Men to purge that ick. However, one thing I really do enjoy is trying to understand things. If the intellectual part of my brain is engaged, the feeling part is more quiet and in the background. So I prefer unsolved cases. Not that I expect to solve them. I don't. But the act of trying is something I find rewarding. A big part of that is because I've always wanted to understand things. Not how a car engine works or how to put something together with tools. Those things will always be mysterious to me. But I've always been drawn to science, history, philosophy, how people think, how the mind works. A bank robber making his getaway shoots and kills a cop hot on his heels. Okay, that type of killing is not hard to understand. The robber just wanted to get away. But if that same robber shoots a customer in the bank for absolutely no reason, there's a mystery, something to figure out. So playing around with ChatGPT, I asked it to list and describe the top 10 movie psychopaths. This was a little interesting, but to be honest, not too much. It became really interesting though, when I used these characters to try to understand certain types of true life killers. It actually produced a wealth of insights. Yes, of course, the movie psychopaths are fictional characters, even when they're inspired by someone real, like Norman Bates was. But these characters that have gone on to become iconic did so for a reason. And once you start digging into them, they do become a pathway of getting into the heads of types of killers that we have a hard time normally doing that with. Let's take the most fictional of the characters on the list. Heath Ledger's the Joker. He's a comic book character. He goes around robbing both good guys and bad guys, then burns the money. As he says, everything burns. There seems to be nothing he wants except to burn stuff, to cause mayhem and chaos. What could that possibly tell us about real killers? Well, actually, there's a lot, it turns out. And we'll take a deeper look when we get to him on the list, but I can point this out to whet your appetite. What did the Idaho killer, Bryan Kohberger, want? He stalked those kids for months. If you think he did this merely because he was mad that maybe someone didn't pay attention to him once, you're off the target. You're trying to imagine Kohberger's motives and his mind as being like yours and mine. It's not. The same thing with the Joker. Not even the bad guys could understand him. He doesn't want power or money. There's not some big idea he's chasing, some cause like saving the planet or fighting capitalism. If you try to understand the Joker in those terms, you'll fail. Well, you'll run into the same problem with Kohberger. No, not that he was like the Joker trying to create mayhem. No, he wasn't doing that. But the problem you run into is trying to imagine him thinking like a normal person. I've talked to many people about him, and every single one of them seems to be making this mistake. They're trying to imagine his motives in some way they can identify with and understand. Like the bank robber shooting a customer inside the bank for absolutely no reason. You can't understand that trying to think like a normal person. If you want to understand it at all, you have to start teaching yourself to think differently. And while I'm on the Joker, I did something else interesting with ChatGPT. I asked it to write a screenplay where the Joker and Hannibal Lecter conspire in jail. This interaction with the chat AI was fascinating and alarming. It has rules and boundaries, but you can get it to break them. What the hell does that even mean? Another reason that the whole interaction was interesting to me was this. I've been doing a lot of research on psychopaths, not just killers, but the psychopathic brain. Most psychopaths never kill anyone. Many go on to become CEOs, surgeons, and world leaders. But they do have alien brains that are wired very different than yours and mine. As I researched this and looked deeply into how the brain operates, it occurred to me that a sentient AI or artificial intelligence that develops some kind of self-awareness will probably very much resemble a psychopath. I'm not saying these AIs will be psychopathic killers. I'm saying their minds will be similar to a psychopath. A psychopath has no capacity for what's called affective empathy. This is where you can feel something that someone else is feeling. Psychopaths are capable of cognitive empathy, where you understand what someone else is feeling, but it arouses no feeling in them. It's utterly cold. The bank robber pulls out the gun, and the mother cowers in the corner with her child. You're watching live on surveillance camera. With cognitive empathy, you understand what has caused her feel, but you don't feel anything yourself when observing it or thinking about it. Doesn't this seem like what sentient AI will be like? Another thing about psychopaths is they don't have a fully formed sense of self. This could be because, as I said, the wiring is just a little off, but it seems to me it also goes along with not being able to feel others. If everyone else in the world seems like just a video game character to you, not real, then how can you experience yourself as real? It must be hard. I am not suggesting ChatGPT is sentient, but I'm saying that when artificial sentience arrives, it'll look very much like this.
And don't worry, I am not reading your emails.
It'll have a level of cognitive empathy, but it won't be able to feel anything when it observes humans.
That hurts me.
It will struggle to even see itself as real or understand what it is. And at the end of the day, it will do things that we can't predict or understand, things that might not even be in its own self-interest, just like the murders of a serial killer are not in his own self-interest. Anyway, please check it out. While I pasted ChatGPT's exact replies so you can see them, I also took a little bit of artistic license in creating an animated character for the AI.
I will subscribe myself if you get to the point quicker in the next video.
You guys will be able to tell where I'm having creative fun and where I'm showing you word for word the amazing interaction with the chat. The technology to create this animated character is really cool, and I'd be happy to show you guys how I did it if you're interested. If it was easy enough for me to create one of these things, you can certainly do it too. So, you know the video has reached the end when the host asks you to click subscribe, but I'm pushy. I'm going to ask you to click notify because the algorithm is not my friend, but you guys are, and I appreciate it.
He told me to remind you to click subscribe. Are we done here?